Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today I have with me Stephen Galsworthy. Stephen is the head of data at TomTom, and we're going to be talking about getting business value from artificial intelligence, or as we will probably now call it, AI, for the rest of the show. So, Stephen, welcome along to the show. Thanks for coming.
It isn't good to be here.
No, I'm pleased to finally have you here. So, let's get kicked off with hearing a bit about you and your background and your role at TomTom.
Yeah, happy to say. I mean, as you mentioned, my speciality is a little bit working with organizations that like to create products using data.
Okay.
And I've always kind of I come from a background in applied mathematics. I did a master's and PhD in that, but I always
Okay.
got a lot more energy out of building things that people could use rather than writing papers that talked
Okay.
about potential applications. So I've
Practical rather than theoretical.
Yeah, exactly. That's what has always kind of given me a lot of energy is really making new stuff that was not possible before.
Right.
So since then, basically for the last 15 years or so, I've worked for about a decade in the energy sector. Um, Particularly at the time when sort of the availability of data and technology was really coming up strong. I
Right.
was I was one of those people that was a data scientist before it was properly called data scientist. Um, so really sort of using data to make predictions about the future, simulation models, and then ultimately moving on to creating products that could be
Mm.
used by customers. So I was
Right.
working at a scale up in London called Open Energy that was creating some technology for balancing the electricity grid.
Right.
Um, I then moved over to the Netherlands, where I'm based now, just in Utrecht, so just outside Amsterdam. I worked for a company called QB, which I think we'll talk a little bit about today, where we had some applications really uh, enabling residential users of electricity to get more insight into how they were wasting energy within the home. This
Okay.
was a company that had a smart thermostat, and we provided a lot of AI software solutions on top of that, and really
Right.
transformed the company from being really hardware focused into uh, AI tech, data driven or data powered products.
Okay.
And now, yeah, I found myself at TomTom. So TomTom is well, everyone knows us from obviously the sat nav devices that we essentially invented that category a number of years ago now. We're still active with direct to consumer products, but we do a lot of things working directly with automotive manufacturers, embedding navigation products with navigation and mapping within their cars. We also do a lot of partnerships with enterprise customers. So, for example, we provide a lot of the underlying location services technology for Microsoft Azure Cloud. We
Right.
work with big tech like Uber, for example, providing a lot of the routing algorithms and stuff that enables them to do a great job, but from behind the scenes.
Amazing.
So yeah,
I've got hundreds of questions about all of what you've just said. So we're gonna pick through
it's
some of
been
this because
quite a journey to get here.
it has, and I think one of the things you said there actually, I think was true for QB, and I think is probably true for TomTom, is this
Mhm.
switch from being hardware provider, a provider of a physical thing, to being basically a software company, which I imagine is quite a shift for an organization to go through, but also just shows where the world is going, where value exists, and how you can create value.
Definitely, and I would say that there's this shift from hardware to software, and then there's almost a greater shift from software into AI powered software. You know,
Okay. Yep.
there's quite a difference in having a
Yes, I
machine
can see
learning
that.
algorithm under the hood rather than a um yeah maybe a software approach where you're basically as the person that's coding that you can be very clear in the behavior you want to define in the system.
Mm.
Whereas if you move to more of a machine learning based system, essentially you're training the computer. So that's the whole machine
Yes.
learning, that you're basically teaching the computer to learn the kind of behavior you would like to see exhibited, but
Yeah.
you're not defining exactly how that's taking place. So there's a substantial shift yet again to get into this real AI world.
Yeah, and I imagine that shift from software to machine learning powered software um, is the kind of almost letting go. I think you painted a picture there about with sort of building an application. You can define the user journey. You can define we're going to go from A to B. This is the process that's going to be followed. These are the inputs that are going to happen. These are the next steps that are going to take place. So you can that's comfortable, right? You can write that in a document or you can build it and iterate. But with this kind of machine learning, particularly with such a consumer facing front end, like some of those applications that you mentioned, I imagine there's a bit of letting go there about, well, we and therefore guardrails that need to go in place, but a bit of letting go about, well, we need to watch and evolve and keep an eye and see how this product produces results and then tweak and adjust accordingly.
Exactly. I mean, in the situations I've worked in recently, so for example, controlling energy usage within homes, that's something that you need to have quite strict boundaries on the control. You don't want the gas boiler in your home to be firing up at unnecessary times. That could lead to a safety risk. If you take it to a TomTom case study where we're providing navigation services, moving almost towards more automated driving, this is a case where you need to be very much in control and on top of the sort of the safety and security implications of the software approach you're taking.
You need to know what decisions it's going to make because there's safety risks involved with both those use cases you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely.
What's so I think just kind of thinking about that in terms of data products or AI products, as you sort of said up front, this seems to me, and we've got some experience in advising companies to kind of go the product route in terms of packaging up things that we call products. And again, if you're a hardware manufacturer, you get products because you've been creating them. But the software, it can sometimes be seen as a bit hidden. People don't necessarily wrap their head around this idea of product. But why is that different? Thinking of these things as products rather than just in inverted commas analytics, insights, dashboards, almost traditional ways of using data. Where's the sort of the fundamental difference there?
I would say for me, the fundamental difference comes in as soon as you package something as a product, you're immediately forced to think, who are the users of the product? So you immediately bring in this user-focused mindset to developing what you need. So instead of if we take for the example of insights through data, there's a lot of insights that you could create. If you set a data scientist or data analyst off without any guidance, they're gonna come up with a load of interesting statistics.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at packaging something up as a data product, you're essentially saying, look, we've identified a need for a user for this product. How can we package this thing up that can add value? That user could be an external customer. That could also be an internal user within the business. But I'd say for me that's the key difference of packaging things up with this product mindset.
Puts it in puts you in the mind of the user of the thing rather than the smarts of the thing that you're creating. It's saying, well, it's got to have an output, it's got to have a benefit, it's got to go somewhere, it's got to be used and useful.
Exactly. And that's where you if you're creating an AI powered product or a data product, as the provider of that product, you need to make sure that you're offering certain guarantees with that. It could be guarantees of the quality of the data that's available, or how quickly that data is available. So you're forced to take things to that next level, which essentially is meaning that by giving guarantees to the users of your product, they're able to then take the data product that you've made, and maybe they're combining it with data from some other source, and that team themselves are creating a data product. So it kind of cascades from there.
Interesting. Is from your perspective, is this about products where data or some kind of outcome of data, like a model, the product, or actually is this really that gets embedded inside a product that people interact with? So, for example, a map isn't a product. Sorry, is a
Hmm.
product that people interact with,
Yeah.
but it's powered by, and you mentioned this at the start, it's powered by some machine learning, it's powered by some AI that makes that product better. So is the product the data or the AI, or is the product this sort of the thing that it supports?
There can be some situations, particularly for internal customers, where just providing the data in a clean, organized format is useful for the
Yeah,
end customer or for
yeah,
the end user. I would say most of the time, sort of, if we're looking at sort of an AI powered product, you're not just going to be providing the raw data. So
mm,
I think a good example is from my time at QB, where essentially what we were doing is taking uh, data from a smart meter, so a smart electricity meter installed within the home, running machine learning algorithms to detect when different appliances were being used within the home,
right,
giving sort of building up a fingerprint of those appliances. So, for example, detecting when a washing machine was being run, giving a feeling for how is that machine behaving, and then being able to offer targeted advice to the owner of that washing machine. Okay, should they uh, do they just have a really old machine? Should they just go out and replace that? Or are they washing all of their clothes at a really high temperature and they could actually get the same level of cleaning at a lower temperature and use less
mm,
energy?
mm,
If in that case, if you were just presenting some raw data, like this is the kilowatt hour consumption of your
yeah,
washing machine on a monthly basis,
yeah,
there's a small subset of customers that would love to see kind of the charts and do the analysis themselves.
yeah,
But to make this more accessible to the wider market, you need to package that up in actionable advice.
yeah.
So you
Or
then
even
have
better, changes to the way energy is consumed in the home directly, rather than just
exactly
advice. Yeah,
if you can fully automate that, and all you're essentially asking your end user to do is saying yes or no, do you want to make a saving? And then
yeah,
it's click a button and everything happens.
yeah,
That's the best kind of user experience.
yeah,
But it's to get you have to you don't often start with having a particular user need and then the first kind of data or AI powered approach you take exactly fulfills that user need.
yeah,
You end up going through a little bit of a dance to get there, and
yeah,
it typically relates back to what's often referred to as sort of a flywheel effect, or the relating to data. It's sometimes referred to as the virtuous cycle of AI.
right,
This is essentially the concept that you start with some data. You've got a product. You've got some users that are out there. They're giving you some data. That gives you um, enough to get started on building an algorithm that will give you, perhaps in this case, identifying washing machine consumption.
mm,
This then allows you to create a better experience for your users. You're giving them some targeted advice that leads you to either get more engagement from your existing user base, or a completely new set of users,
mm,
which in turn gives you more data. The more data you have allows you to refine and get better algorithms, which
yeah,
increases the experience that leads on. You can see how the
got it.
cycle spins up.
Yeah, and I guess that's true for, obviously you use the example of the washing machine, but that's true for any product and consumption of a product. Certainly, where it's got volume of usage or users.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this concept is pretty well known in companies that are using AI. So take the
Mm,
example of Netflix. For example, Netflix really started out as being sort of the digital version of the kind of DVD rental service.
mm,
As you see over time, they have more and more data that they're able to make personalized recommendations to you as a user.
yeah,
By going around this cycle, they're now using the data that they have about what users like to watch to commission their own movies and series, to
yeah.
make sure they're providing the right
People to
kind of
come back,
options to
and then
increase
people come back,
their
and
user
yeah,
base further. So
yeah,
you could see
yeah,
like a big scale how this can really when this flywheel really spins up, I mean, it dominates the entirety of the business. And I mean,
Yeah.
other big businesses, Amazon, Google, Facebook, TikTok, all of these are based upon similar kind of techniques.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I can see that kind of really taking hold across, not even just AI actually, but any interaction with any product or service in the data space. So great,
Mm-hmm.
great framework to think about. So is there so just thinking about, so we talked there about creating value for the end customer of the thing. There's
Mm-hmm.
creating value for the team or department that's responsible for
Mm-hmm.
making that thing better. And so the sort of the heart of all of that is about creating value. How do you what, what's your approach? How do you go on that journey of making sure that you're delivering value? How do you judge success? How do you know what you're going after? And how do you go from that kind of gem of, oh, we want to help, improve the route that someone takes on a map, or the efficiency of their washing machine? How do you go on that journey? Have you got like a formula that you use?
Yeah, I think essentially the approach there is to start small, iterate quickly, do experiments, and learn by doing.
Okay.
Um, so it very much fits into kind of the what we generally call sort of the agile way of development.
Mm,
And in that sense, I don't mean strictly adhering to a framework like Scrum, but really just the fast iterations and learning cycle.
right.
So typically for a data product, you you need to be building understanding of what your end users' needs are or potential needs are. And you also need to start exploring what's possible to do with the data that you currently have access to.
Right.
Um, and you're looking essentially for a spark of inspiration. Oh, we've got this data available. If we run this very simple algorithm on top of, um, we can give this extra set of information or insight that we think has the potential of being valuable. So, I mean, if I go back to the early days when I was at QB, we we had the feeling that helping users to not waste energy in their home, that there was some potential in that.
Mm,
Exactly how to do that was unclear.
mm,
But then when we started saying, okay, we've got access to data from electricity meters, we reckon we can identify some different appliances and give some advice. So our first version of the algorithm was one of my former colleagues who had a PhD in what's called a disaggregation approaches. So essentially being
right.
able to look at a trace from an electricity meter and identify an appliance. He did that visually. So we just put some graphs in front of him. He said, "Yep, that's a washing machine, that's a dryer, that's a
Wow.
dishwasher." Tested it out with, I don't know, five users at that time. Got a little bit of an indication. Yeah, we could be onto something. The next stage was to slightly automate that approach, test it out on 10 external users, um, then take it to the next level, move it up to 100, refine a little bit of the proposition, perhaps a little bit of the user experience,
Mm.
even the user interface, so the way the user's seeing it,
And
and
at
then
that
you're slowly building up.
point, are you trying to validate that what you thought was a washing machine and what you thought was an iron and what you thought was a dryer is indeed that, or are you more testing out the as you said there, the customer interaction with the end point, or both, I guess?
You need to do both at the same time. So you're
Mm.
obviously you want to test that the sort of detect in this case the detection algorithms you have for an appliance are detecting the
Yeah.
appliance you think it is with the right level of accuracy for for you to be valid.
Yeah.
I think the biggest trap that data science teams get stuck in is they think that getting an algorithm to 99% accuracy is good enough,
Mm.
and then throw it over the fence to another team or another group to get some value from. I think it's
Yeah.
really important that simultaneous in that process of improving the detection of the algorithms, you're validating whether you're actually scratching the itch of that
Mm.
user's need. You know,
Mm.
that's going
So
to
it
be the
doesn't
key
matter how good the
thing.
model is. Doesn't matter how good the model is if it's not used. If the
Exactly. If
yeah,
it's not providing value to that end user or value to the business in another way, then yeah, you need to stop and do something else.
mm,
It's so it's always really important to have that connection, and I found it's really important to have a mindset within the data team. You cannot be satisfied from just getting your model to a certain accuracy level.
yeah,
You really have to only be satisfied when the end user of the product that you're
mm,
creating is happy with the service that they're getting.
yeah.
And that's what drives you on to the next level.
I'm glad this came up because this is where the conversation about product then comes back in, and because actually the product is the interact the outcome of the product is the interaction the customer has and the change of behavior they have, and whether they like it, whether they use it, whether it's valuable, not the smart algorithm that's 99% accurate. So do you set yourself
Exactly.
up sort of very closely aligned to the end consumer team, or are you kind of more sort of, we're a data function, you're the customer interaction function, we chuck to you, but we're happy when you're happy? Or is it much more kind of like you're a group of people that are trying to solve the customer need?
I think the right solution there depends on the maturity of the business.
Mm, mm,
So the situation that we grew into at QB was essentially having data scientists and engineers embedded within end-to-end product teams.
right.
That's at the scale of TomTom, which is at the next scale up, that we have many products
Mm,
and many product teams. We are also looking to embed that data science and that data expertise in general very closely to the business expertise,
mm,
the product management, the software developers that are going to be building the software product that the AI lives within.
yeah.
And you need this team to be working very closely together to make these quick iterations.
Yeah.
I think a trap that many organizations have fallen into in the last 5 years, particularly, is having a sort of a data science center of excellence where you have typically a very smart driven group of people, but they often really struggle to get beyond that proof of concept.
Mm,
Um, that there often tends to be a misconception within a business that you get to a proof of concept phase that, oh yeah, you're 90% the way towards getting the value. In
yeah.
reality, it's closer to you probably 10% of the way to
Mm,
actually getting some reasonable business value at the end of it.
right. Yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense, and that collaboration is easier depending on closeness and depending on the culture of the organization, and people understanding that data and AI isn't this thing over here. It's actually to power the product, the end product that exists.
Exactly. I think that's really, as sort of data professionals, we need to fit in this sort of landscape of having product and engineering. So many software companies have this pretty strong software versus, or sort of software engineering versus product split, where you've
Mm,
essentially going all the way at different levels of the company with engineering managers, product managers, all the way up to a CTO and
mm,
CPO covering the
mm,
technology and the product, respectively. Where does data fit in? Because
mm,
data is, it's complementary to both, but it's a little bit tangential. If I look at my own career, in the past when I was at QB, I had a lot of responsibility for the product strategy. So it's very much aligned more with the product organization. Now I find the setup that we have at TomTom is I'm part of the technology organization, and working very closely there. So it's certainly, as you're moving towards data powered products, the level of knowledge of all individuals as part of that product creation process, they need to really be up to speed on what does it mean to create an AI powered product, and why does that look different than the world of just to make it
just
sound similar,
yeah, just
the
software.
software
Yeah,
just software, because there is a
yeah.
substantial difference there.
Is that's a good point. Is that bit about product teams needing to understand, get the value that data insights AI can bring to their product. Is that more important than where this data team sits, whether it's in product or whether it's in technology?
I totally agree. I think it's really about the mindset and how you can get these quick iterations, this experimental mindset up and running. The sort of the organizational structure that you put in place, I mean, has to be something that works for your organization. Sometimes that makes sense for data to fall under product, sometimes for data to fall under technology. Some organizations to have a completely sort of separate pillar that's based around data. If you look particularly, perhaps some of the more regulated industries, banking is a prime example, where you're seeing the CDO role as being one of the key pillars at the board level. That's where obviously adhering to different regulatory pressures, privacy regulation, etc., is incredibly key for the business at large. How that will emerge in software companies, I believe, is slightly different. I think we're seeing in some places that the CDO role is useful for a stage, but I mean, if we look at some of the larger companies, I was talking about Netflix earlier. You don't find a CDO role at Netflix, but you would find that any executive that you speak to has a core fundamental understanding of data and AI.
Well, that's the whole difference between maturity levels. I think by the time you're at a data powered, data enabled culture, it's in the DNA, then you don't need someone at the top table who's responsible for it. It's just already in the psyche. Where you don't have that, you need to have some senior responsibility to make it happen. I think that's what we see in the market.
Exactly, and that's my experiences as well. I mean, I really enjoy working with companies that are starting as not being sort of data native, but having a huge amount of data available and taking them to the next level. And building in that mindset, the processes in place, the organizational structure when required, as well as the underlying technology that can support that.
What are some of the biggest challenges with all of this? Because it's not, this stuff isn't easy, right? AI isn't easy. Getting product teams to understand why it's important isn't necessarily easy. Getting customers to engage with an endpoint and a trust that it's all okay isn't easy. Technology sometimes isn't that straightforward. Getting data sets together, all of this stuff isn't that easy. But what are some of the biggest challenges with really making this work? I think you just mentioned there you like to join and work with organizations that are sort of at a point and you want to take them to the next, they get it and are doing some things, but take them to the next stage. What are some of the biggest challenges you found with making this successful?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we were talking about it earlier. It's getting that mindset in place that's really key. I think the big challenge is there's no blueprint to doing this. It's not that you can just. We were just talking about Netflix. It doesn't make sense for an organization that's at maybe a level 3 or 4 maturity out of 5 to be copying a Netflix. That doesn't make sense. You've got to find an approach that works for you. And the way of doing that is again iteration and experimentation. A big part of that, and that's something that I've really enjoyed in my roles, is growing this next generation of leaders to step into those roles. We've seen the entire data science field change quite substantially in the last 10 years. I like to draw parallels to maybe 20 years ago, we would refer to software engineers as coders or programmers. It was the people, and now if you speak to software people in the software engineering field, you've got all of the different flavors of hardware, software, front end, back end. There's a lot of things that all fit together.
It's a mature kind of ecosystem of people.
It's mature, and we've seen gradually sort of the data scientist, data engineering roles slowly split into, okay, machine learning engineer, analytics translator, data product manager,
Yeah.
data owner. This whole, and you see that slowly spreading. But yeah, where that's going to be in the next 5 or 10 years, it's no one knows yet. We need to slowly explore that. I guess the second big challenge I would say is the complexity of the engineering of getting a. So there's one thing getting an AI powered product from the sort of the proof of concept to pilot to in production.
Yeah.
That requires a big scale up, but being in production, that's not the end. You've got to, from there, you've got to deal with pretty unique challenges, like maybe the underlying data changes. You get a drift in the data that leads to a drift in the model. You need to then retrain. The example, for say from COVID, when COVID hit, example from TomTom, a lot of our estimations for the travel time that it would take for people to go from one location to another obviously takes into account historical information and live traffic. But when you go from an unprecedented change in people's behavior, from commuting to the office every day into not going into the office at all, that goes outside of the bounds that you can perhaps expect from the machine learning models that you've trained. So you have to stick with that. You need to get things like automated monitoring in place, alerting. You don't want to be reliant on just a data engineer or machine learning engineer to be vigilant and aware of these changes. You want to be. You need
a flag. You need a flag to.
You want a flag. You want to be on top of that change before your end customer notices. You need to be, because that's going to be what allows you to provide the quality of service that you need to as an organization.
And I guess in that example, once then you got a sort of 1.5, 2-year period where it's like it's different from what it used to look like, and then you go back to normal, and it's then different from the previous 2 years. So you sort of got this strange 4 or 5 year period where it's not like a consistent level of pattern that the model can learn. So you've got to go back and retrain again, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the situation. You need to have some degree of resiliency in your machine learning models. But you can, I mean, no one would have been able to predict the scale of impact that COVID had on the world. So that's where relatively simple concepts like automated monitoring of your machine learning models in their production environments, rigorous testing, from sort of unit testing all the way up to integration testing, so really adopting the software engineering best practices. That becomes really key of offering these AI powered products at scale.
Great. Well, not to get us into a COVID discussion, but definitely though that's a really good set of case studies where life was very different. So therefore, anything you train a model to look, to understand and look at, all of a sudden it's very different. So it needs to know what to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's a clear example of when the world flipped upside down overnight almost. What you're seeing within a lot of situations from TomTom, the way that the road network is changing, it's continually changing. So you're always needing to stay up to date. And we put a lot of effort at TomTom into automating that map creation process.
Right. Because
that's the way that we can stay on top of this ever-changing environment.
Yeah. Brilliant. And in terms of sort of thinking about wrapping up, we touched a little bit there on where things go in terms of sort of structure and setup and approach to this stuff. Do you see the kind of industry, if you like, of artificial intelligence and machine learning continuing to kind of increase adoption in this way, or do we hit kind of like a tipping point where it kind of it kind of not takes over in a robots taking over kind of way, but it becomes too
Hmm.
prevalent. It's impacting our lives too much, and sort of the ethics and the guardrails and the governance side starts to kind of say, well, hang on a minute, don't we need to kind of think about this in a different way?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a combination of both approaches play out. I, I think if we were to look in 10 years' time, we're going to see the vast majority of software products are going to have an AI component to them.
Mm,
We're already seeing that shift now.
right.
We, to take for consumer focused products, take TikTok, for example, the main thing that's the main selling point there beyond the sort of the attraction of a short term video, short format video,
Yeah.
is the algorithm that powers the recommendations.
Mm,
We're going to see more and more areas of our lives that benefit from having basically access to cheap predictions or cheap recommendations about the future. That
mm,
can be anything from that's probably going to be embedded within your toaster to on all of the entertainment that you consume, as well as part of the business world. So
yeah.
fully, I don't expect that to slow down. I do expect, we're seeing it more and more now, that end users becoming more and more aware of the consequences of making their personal data available. Um,
Mm,
there's naturally a trade-off there. That as an end user, if say for example, if you're willing to share additional information that gives you a personalized service, that could be a personalized navigation from home to work. It could be a personalized recommendations of how to reduce your carbon footprint or energy consumption. There's more of an understanding with customers that yes, you have to make some of your data available to get that personalization, but there's also more of a realization of some of the perhaps more nefarious
mm,
things that could be done with that data.
yeah.
So that's I would say particularly from TomTom's perspective, one of the key differentiating features we have is that we're incredibly sensitive about how we deal with customers' private data. We don't have any uh, additional revenue sources. So, for example, from selling targeted advertising to our end users,
Yeah.
and we see that many customers are willing to pay quite a high premium for that extra levels of protection, particularly when it's around something so sensitive as about your
Yeah, where
real
you
time
are.
location
Yes. Yeah.
on the world in the world.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it doesn't get much more sensitive than that.
Yes. Yeah, well, well, great that you guys think about that, and I think there's always that kind of trust issue of that level, sharing that data with what's done with it, and as soon as you start to sort of sell that and advertising comes in. I mean, we've seen it. People don't seem hugely bothered on some of the social platforms, but people have different
Mm-hmm.
tolerance levels depending on the application, don't they? So I think where you are, you want to decide whether you want to tell people that. So I think great that
Mm-hmm.
you guys are thinking about that. Listen, it's been fascinating talking to you. The this kind of AI powered software, this kind of value from AI kind of topic, I think is vast. It's for a select few still. I think I agree with you. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's mainstream, but it's not prevalent across lots of industries, lots of businesses. Certainly in the way that you guys are dealing with it. So it's great to talk to someone
Mm-hmm.
who's at that kind of sharper end of creating really valuable AI products. So brilliant to have you on the show, and I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will all catch you again soon.